I am Abhishek Keshavani, Assistant Professor, ABES Engineering College. In this video lecture, we are going to learn about the constructors in Java. So basically, what is constructor? So constructor in Java is a special type of method that is used to initialize the object. Suppose you have created a particular class and you want to create an object. So when you create object, you want to initialize some data members also. So for that purpose, we need a constructor. And the constructor is invoked at a time of object creation. So when you create the object of the particular class, then constructor automatically invokes. Means you don't have to call the constructor, or constructor automatically calls when you create an object. And why we call constructor? Because it constructs the value, means whatever the members you have, you can initialize these members with the help of constructor. So basically it will provide data for the object. That is why it is also known as constructor. The name of the constructor is basically used for constructing the values. And this is the reason why we call it as constructor. So basically, when you want to create a constructor in Java, so you have to follow the two rules. Means first, here we have the constructor name must be the same as its class name, and it must have no explicit return type. Okay, so these 2 points you have to keep in mind while creating the constructor. Okay, so we'll practically implement and see how we can create a constructor in Java, and after that we will see how different way by which we can create a constructor. Okay. So basically there are two types of Java constructor. The first one is the default constructor, or we can also say that it is no argument constructor. And the second one is the parameterized constructor. Means when we have the constructor that have the parameter, that is also called a parameterized constructor. So we will create these two types of constructor. Okay. So these are the different types of Java constructor we have. Next, if you have not created a constructor, what will happen then? Suppose we have a class bike and we don't create any constructor here. So there is a rule: if there is no constructor in a class, compiler automatically creates a default constructor. Means compiler automatically creates a default constructor, and this particular class will have this default constructor just to initialize the members of the this class. Okay. So this is the rule of when you don't declare any constructor inside the class. Okay. So let's see how we can create a constructor in Java. So here we have a main method. Okay, and the project is CETL underscore object oriented programming system. We have created this project, and inside this project we have main method. So suppose we have created a new class. Okay, and the name of the class is student. So here we have a class student, and inside this student class, we have created ID, name, now I'm going to create a constructor. So why we need constructor here? Here we have two different members we have declared inside the class. Okay. So here we have ID and name, but these two ID and name are not initialized. And every time we create object, these two different members also initialize, but with what value? So here we have the concept of the constructor. Suppose we have created a constructor here, and in this constructor, what will happen? I'm going to initialize these two members. So whenever the object is created here, first I declare here ID, and the second I declare the name. So now I'm going to initialize this. So here we have to use this keyword. So here we have this ID and name, and we have created this constructor. And after creating this constructor, we have just initialized the members here, ID and name. Okay. Now, if we want to check whether these two members are initialized or not, so let's suppose we create one more method display, and inside this, we will just print out these two members. So here I will print ID. Then so here just we have created method display just to ensure whether these two members are initialized or not. So let's create the object or a student class here. So here we have, you can see that now this time I am going to initialize with the two values. The first one is the ID and the second one is the name. Now what happened this time? We have created an object with these two members initialized automatically at a time of object creation. So we have actually just created the object and these two members, ID and name, automatically initialize with the ID and name provided at the time of object creation. Okay. So how we can ensure that this is initialized? So we have already created the object student and just call the display method. So when you call display method here, so you can see the ID and the name is initialized. So this is for a particular one object. What will happen if I want to create another object? So is it applicable or not? Let's see. Suppose this time I am going to create another student one object. And here we have initialized with another ID. Okay. And now I'm going to call the student one dot display. So now we have two different objects here and initialize with two different values here. So here you can see, yes, we have two objects with two different values initialized at a time of compilation. Okay. So here you can also create different constructor also, and we can call as constructor overloading also, or we can have constructor with parameter or without parameter. So here you can see the first constructor here we have two parameters. Suppose I will create one more constructor. Okay. And here what we have done here, we have not passed any argument here. Okay. Simply just I have written no argument constructor. Okay. So here we have two concepts. Let's see. The first concept is that we have basically two constructors. So when we have two constructors and basically the name of the constructor is same as that of the name of the class. So here you can see the concept of constructor overloading. So here we have two different constructors. So which constructor is called is basically depend on the parameter. So here we have given two parameters and here we have given no parameter. Okay. So here if we don't give any parameter, okay. So if we suppose run this particular program, okay. So we are getting the same output. That means the first constructor is not called. So here let's change, and here I'm not going to give any parameters, and this time I'm going to run it again. So now you can see here we have this ID as 12 and name as Abhishek. And here you can see we have a no argument constructor, and here we have again called the display method. Okay. So when you call the display method, so here the ID in the name is print as ID is initialized with the default value of integer, and name is initialized with the default value, that is string is initialized with the value null. Okay, because we have called the display method also. So means here in the student1 object, here the constructor is called and these two members are not initialized. And what happened when we call the display method? So the default value of ID is 0 and the default value of the name is null. It is printed. Okay. So we can see how the constructor is called basically depend on the argument. Okay. And this is basically the constructor overloading. Clear? So what happened if we don't declare any constructor? Let's see what happened. So suppose I have removed these two constructors. Okay. Just remove these two constructors. And here this time we can see I have removed both the constructor, and here we have the members ID and name, and I have just printed the ID and name here. And inside this main, this time I have not to give any argument. Okay. Now I have to run this program. I have not given any argument. I have just created the object and called the display method and just run this. So here you can see these are initialized with the default value. So how it is actually possible? So the concept we have already learned in the starting that when you don't declare any constructor, what happens? Java automatically creates a default constructor. Okay. So when you have a default constructor, these two members initialize with the default value. Is that clear? So we have just call the display method, and inside display method we have called this. So is there any way by which we can declare these two members? So either we can directly assign the value, or we can create a constructor and initialize with a particular value. Okay. So we have already studied about a constructor overloading. So what is constructor overloading? So basically it is a technique in which a class can have any number of constructors that differ in the parameter list. That we have already seen in our example also. We have created two constructors, one with two arguments, ID and name, and another with the default, means we have no parameters. Okay. And how the compiler differentiate? The compiler differentiate these constructors by taking into account the number of parameter in the list and their type. So means when you create an object at the time of object creation, whatever the parameter you have passed it, so on the basis of that, the compiler decide which constructor we have to call. So this is basically the constructor overloading. That's all for this video. In the next video, we are going to learn about more concepts of the inheritance. Okay. Thank you.